Twin girls from Virginia vanished on a cruise ship holiday, leaving their single mother's world torn apart. But 10 months later, a suitcase washes up on the shore, and what they find inside leaves everyone in shock. Rachel Marin sat in the dimly lit living room of her small Charlottesville home, surrounded by the remnants of a 10-month investigation that had yielded nothing but dead ends. Missing persons flyers with the smiling faces of her twin daughters were scattered across her coffee table, some with corners curled from handling, others faded from sunlight that streamed through the blinds she rarely adjusted anymore. Police reports and case files formed precarious stacks on her desk, a collection she'd read so many times she could recite passages from memory. Beside her armchair, a small table held a dozen unopened sympathy cards. Rachel couldn't bring herself to read them. Acknowledging the condolences felt too much like accepting her daughters were gone forever. She rubbed her tired eyes and set down the case file she'd been reviewing, the one detailing the 4th day of their cruise vacation, when 8-year-old Rayleigh and Millie had vanished without a trace. Her gaze drifted to the sympathy cards. Maybe today she would finally open one. Maybe today she would allow herself to feel what others already assumed, that her girls were never coming home. Rachel's fingers had just touched the envelope when her phone rang. The screen displayed Detective Mace Alvarez. Her heart quickened as she answered. "Detective? Any news?" she asked, her voice betraying the fragile hope she still clung to. She expected the usual, a tip that led nowhere, a sighting that couldn't be verified, or just a courtesy check-in. "Rachel." Alvarez's voice was different today, tight, controlled, with an undercurrent she hadn't heard before. "I've just received information from the police department in Ocracoke Island, North Carolina." She straightened in her chair. "What kind of information?" There was a pause on the other end. "I need to warn you that what I'm about to tell you is disturbing. A local fisherman found a suitcase containing remains. Remains we believe might belong to one of your daughters." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Rachel's hand gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. "What?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "I can't explain everything over the phone," Alvarez continued. "We're flying to North Carolina together. The suitcase also contains personal items and objects that we need you to identify immediately." "When?" Rachel asked, already on her feet, moving toward her bedroom on unsteady legs. "I'll pick you up in an hour. The evidence is being held at a forensic lab attached to the Sheriff's Department in North Carolina. It contains remains, so they're waiting for our arrival before proceeding further." After hanging up, Rachel noticed tears had slipped down her cheeks. She moved mechanically through her home, still in disbelief, as she packed a small overnight bag. Her mind spun with memories from 10 months ago, the cruise she had worked overtime to afford, a vacation meant to create lasting moments with her daughters. She recalled the restaurant where they'd stopped for a late lunch after swimming. It had been quiet just past 3:30 p.m. with minimal staff. She'd left the girls for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, to answer an important call outside where the reception was better. When she returned, they were gone. The restaurant staff had seen the twins leave but couldn't say where they had gone. The hours that followed were a blur of panic and disbelief as Rachel frantically scoured every corner of the massive ship. The cruise staff issued a ship-wide alert and launched an exhaustive search, combing through public areas, kids' clubs, pools, and restrooms. They conducted cabin-to-cabin checks of all staterooms, including those that were locked or unassigned. Security footage showed the girls watching a poolside performance, but when the crowd dispersed, they disappeared from view. Despite reviewing hours of CCTV footage from around the ship, there was no further trace of them. After 24 hours with no sign of the twins, the ship's flag state was notified. The U.S. Coast Guard and FBI became involved. Local port authorities and police at the ship's last dock and upcoming ports were informed of the situation. A formal investigation commenced, including head counts, lockdowns, and interviews with all passengers who had to show identification. Despite the exhaustive search, Rayleigh and Millie remained missing. Some passengers whispered that they must have fallen overboard. Others speculated they had been taken when the ship docked. The cruise line insisted their security protocols were sound, but the fact remained that 2 8-year-old girls had vanished without explanation. An hour slipped by unnoticed, lost in the haze of Rachel's thoughts. A sudden knock at the door jolted her back to the present. She grabbed her overnight bag and opened the door to find Detective Alvarez standing there, his expression grave yet composed. "Are you ready?" he asked gently. Rachel nodded, locking her door behind her. As they walked to his unmarked police car, she steeled herself for what was to come. After 10 months of uncertainty, she was about to face a mother's worst nightmare, or perhaps find the first real clue to what happened to her daughters. The flight to North Carolina passed in tense silence. Rachel stared out the small airplane window, watching the landscape below change from urban sprawl to the coastal plains of the Outer Banks. Detective Alvarez respected her space, reviewing case notes on his tablet while occasionally glancing her way to ensure she was holding up. When they landed, a local officer met them at the regional airport and drove them to a modest sheriff's substation near the edge of town. The building was utilitarian, a single-story brick structure set back from the road, surrounded by pine trees that swayed in the coastal breeze. "The forensic materials from Ocracoke Island were sent here," Alvarez explained as they approached the entrance. "It's the nearest facility equipped to handle this kind of evidence." Inside, the air was cold and antiseptic, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. A sheriff's deputy guided them through a series of corridors to a back room where the evidence was being kept. "Before we go in," Alvarez said, stopping Rachel with a gentle hand on her arm, "I want you to prepare yourself. What you're about to see will be difficult." Rachel nodded, her throat too tight for words. They were given masks and sterile gowns to wear. As they entered the examination room, Rachel noticed a weathered man in his 50s standing to one side, speaking quietly with an officer. His hands were rough and calloused, his skin tanned from years under the sun. "Mrs. Marin," the sheriff said, "this is Curtis Bannister, the fisherman who found the suitcase." The man stepped forward, his expression a mix of sympathy and discomfort. "I'm sorry about your loss, ma'am," he said, his voice gravelly. "I wish I'd found something different that day." Rachel managed a nod of acknowledgment before her attention was drawn to the center of the room. There, on a large stainless steel table, lay the suitcase. It was medium-sized, square, and had clearly been subjected to the harsh elements of the ocean. The once blue material was faded to a grayish hue, its seams warped and bulging from long exposure to salt and sun. A medical examiner stood nearby, waiting for their acknowledgment before he proceeded. "Mrs. Marin, we've documented everything as it was found," he explained. "I'll show you the contents now." Rachel braced herself, gripping the edge of a nearby counter as the examiner carefully lifted the lid of the suitcase. She gasped, tears immediately beating in her eyes. Inside lay the badly decomposed remains of a small child. 10 months drifting in ocean currents had left the body bloated, discolored, and partially skeletonized, but the child had been wrapped in layers of clothing that preserved some identifying features. "The victim appears to have died from asphyxiation," the medical examiner explained clinically. "There's no evidence of blunt force trauma, no sharp injuries, no blood. This indicates the victim likely died quickly and quietly." But Rachel barely heard him. Her eyes were fixed on the faded red Minnie Mouse t-shirt, the same one Millie had been wearing that day on the cruise. Partially visible beneath the decomposed remains was a pair of blue swim goggles, the initial M still faintly visible on the side. "That's Millie's shirt," Rachel whispered, her voice breaking. "Those are her goggles. I bought matching sets for both girls, but Millie's had an M and Rayleigh's had an R." The medical examiner nodded solemnly. "We'd like your permission to take a DNA sample from you for confirmation, though based on your identification of these personal effects." Yes, of course, Rachel agreed numbly. But I don't need DNA to tell me that's my daughter. Detective Alvarez placed a supportive hand on her shoulder as the examiner continued, showing her a separate evidence bag. There was something else found with the remains, he said, an item that doesn't appear to belong with a child's possessions. Inside the clear plastic bag was a silver Zippo lighter, tarnished by seawater but still intact. Engraved on its surface were the initials K.E. This doesn't belong to my daughters, Rachel confirmed, studying the lighter through the plastic. They were 8 years old. They wouldn't have had something like this. It's our first potential lead, Alvarez noted, examining the lighter. An anomaly that could help us identify whoever did this. Rachel turned to the fisherman. Mr. Bannister, can you tell me exactly how you found this? The man shifted his weight from one foot to the other. I was walking along the beach near my home, like I do most mornings. Noticed something washed up that didn't look like usual debris. When I got closer, I could smell... Well, it wasn't good. I opened it just enough to see what was inside and called the police right away. Was there anything else? Rachel asked desperately. Any sign of my other daughter, Rayleigh? Bannister shook his head. Just the suitcase, ma'am. I'm sorry. Rachel turned back to Detective Alvarez. Why would someone put Millie in a suitcase and throw it into the ocean? If they wanted to dispose of her? She struggled with the words. Why not something that would sink? That's a good question, the sheriff interjected. This style of suitcase is made of a material that actually becomes buoyant when submerged. If the perpetrator didn't weight it down properly, it would eventually float to the surface and drift with the currents. What happens now? Rachel asked, looking between the officers. We process all the evidence, Alvarez explained. The suitcase itself is an older model with distinct characteristics. Not many people use this type anymore. We'll track down where it was sold and try to identify who purchased it. Same with the Zippo lighter. The sheriff pointed to the partially peeled price sticker on the bottom of the lighter. There's a store logo still visible here. It's not from any major chain that I recognize, but it might give us a lead. Rachel peered at the sticker, feeling a flicker of recognition. That pattern seems familiar somehow, but I can't place it. May I take photos? She asked, already reaching for her phone. Of course, the sheriff nodded. We'll also send you digital copies of all evidence photos and reports. As Rachel took pictures, Alvarez continued discussing the case with the local authorities. With these findings, we're officially reclassifying this from a missing persons case to a homicide investigation, he stated. We'll need to coordinate with the cruise line again, review all security footage, and re-interview key personnel who were working that day. We'll also need to map the ship's route against ocean currents to determine where the suitcase might have been dropped. The sheriff nodded. Our forensic team will complete their analysis of the remains and all items found in the suitcase. We've already begun DNA testing. Mrs. Marin, Alvarez turned to Rachel. We'd like you to stay in the area for a few days. We'll need additional statements from you as the investigation progresses. Rachel wiped a tear from her cheek and straightened her shoulders. I understand. Before I go to wherever I'm staying, I'd like to visit the beach where the suitcase was found. Alvarez exchanged glances with the sheriff. Are you sure that's wise? I need to see it, Rachel insisted, a new determination in her voice. I need to stand in that spot. I have to be strong enough to face this if I'm ever going to find Rayleigh. After a moment's consideration, Alvarez nodded. All right, I'll accompany you. I should see the location myself anyway. I can take you both there, Bannister offered. My boat's docked nearby, and some of the investigation team is still at the site. Rachel nodded gratefully. Thank you. I'd appreciate that. The journey to Ocracoke Island took just under an hour by boat. Rachel sat at the bow, her face turned into the salt spray as Curtis Bannister navigated the choppy waters separating the barrier islands from the mainland. Detective Alvarez sat beside her, alternating between making calls to update his department and watching Rachel with concern. "It's just over there," Bannister called over the engine noise, pointing toward a stretch of shoreline ahead. "That's where I found it." As they approached, Rachel could see a small crowd gathered on the beach. Yellow police tape cordoned off a section of sand, and several officers in uniform moved about the area methodically, taking photographs and measurements. A news van was parked on a nearby access road, a reporter and cameraman standing at a respectful distance from the police line. Bannister skillfully guided the boat toward a small dock extending from the shore. Once secured, he helped Rachel and Detective Alvarez disembark onto the weathered wooden planks. "This way," he said, leading them down the dock and onto the beach. The sand was cool beneath Rachel's feet as they approached the cordoned-off area. An officer lifted the tape to allow them access, nodding in recognition to Detective Alvarez. "Mrs. Marin," the officer said solemnly, "we're very sorry for your loss." Rachel acknowledged him with a slight nod, her eyes fixed on the depression in the sand where the suitcase had been found. Though the actual suitcase had been removed, the investigators had preserved the site for further evidence collection. "Right here," Bannister said, stopping at the edge of the depression. "This is exactly where I found it. The tide was going out, and it had just been left on the sand." Rachel stared at the spot, trying to process that this remote, beautiful stretch of beach was where her daughter's remains had come to rest after 10 months adrift. She crouched down, her fingers digging into the cool, damp sand. "There must be more evidence," she whispered, sifting the grains through her fingers. "Something else that could tell us where Rayleigh is." Detective Alvarez knelt beside her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "The forensic team has been very thorough, Rachel. This is a significant lead after 10 months of searching. We'll find Rayleigh, too." A few feet away, the news reporter had noticed their arrival and was speaking urgently to her cameraman. Alvarez saw them and frowned. "Let me handle the press," he said, rising to his feet. "You take a moment here." As Alvarez walked over to speak with the reporter, Bannister remained with Rachel. "There's an accommodation not far from here," he said after a moment of respectful silence. "A small cabin resort where you could stay tonight before heading back to the mainland tomorrow. The owner's right over there, actually." He nodded toward a middle-aged man standing with the other onlookers beyond the police tape. Rachel wiped her eyes and stood up. "I think I'd like that. I don't want to leave just yet." "I understand," Bannister said kindly. "When my son went missing in a boating accident 5 years ago, I couldn't leave the harbor for weeks. Sometimes you need to be close to the last place they were." Rachel looked at him with sudden understanding. "Did you ever find him?" Bannister shook his head. "The sea keeps its secrets, but at least I know where to go when I want to talk to him." When Alvarez returned, Rachel told him of her plan to stay overnight. He nodded thoughtfully. "That's fine, but I'm going to assign an officer to stay with you for protection. Until we know more about what happened to your daughters, we need to be cautious." He called over a female officer who had been helping with the scene investigation. "Officer Martinez will accompany you to the cabins and remain with you overnight." Rachel thanked him, then allowed Bannister to introduce her to the cabin owner, a genial man named Greg Harrison, who expressed his deep sympathies and assured her they had plenty of space. "It's not tourist season yet," Harrison explained, as they walked the short distance to the cluster of beachfront cabins. "You'll have all the privacy you need." The cabin was simple but clean, a single room with a queen bed, small kitchenette, and bathroom. A covered porch faced the ocean, with 2 Adirondack chairs positioned to watch the waves. After settling her things inside, Rachel found herself drawn to the porch. Officer Martinez took up a discreet position nearby, giving her space while maintaining her protective watch. A young waitress brought Rachel a mug of coffee, offering it with a sympathetic smile. "Welcome drink on the house. I'm so sorry about your daughter." Rachel accepted the mug with murmured thanks, wrapping her cold fingers around its warmth as she sat watching the waves crash against the shore. The same ocean that had carried Millie's body to this beach continued its eternal rhythm, indifferent to human tragedy. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Rachel noticed movement from the cabin directly across from hers. A man emerged, checking his pockets as if ensuring he had everything before departure. He set his bag down on the small table outside his door while he locked up, then headed toward the resort's main office. Rachel noticed he had left something on the outdoor coffee table, a small metallic object catching the late afternoon sun. Curious, she walked over to check and found a cigarette package and a lighter. She picked them up, turning the lighter over in her hand. On the bottom was a price sticker with a store logo that matched the partial sticker from the evidence lighter. Rachel felt a chill run through her despite the warm air. Seeing the man still heading toward the front desk, she hurried to catch up with him, lighter in hand. "Excuse me," she called. "You forgot this." The man turned, surprised, then smiled when he saw the lighter and his cigarette package. "Thanks. I would have missed that for sure." As he took it from her, Rachel pointed to the sticker. "If you don't mind me asking, where did you get this? I collect vintage lighters, and I've been looking for this brand." "Oh, it's from a little magazine kiosk in Greenville," he replied. "Small place, but they've got all sorts of odds and ends." "Does it have a name?" Rachel asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "Kearns's Corner News, I think. It's run by this older guy who's always got some deal going on." "Why? You from around there?" "No, but there's a similar shop in Charlottesville, Virginia, where I live," Rachel said, her heart beginning to race. It might be the same chain. Before the man could respond, a staff member approached them, carrying a square suitcase identical to the one found on the beach. "Sir, are you sure you want to leave this behind?" the staff member asked. "We found it in your cabin." Rachel's eyes widened as she stared at the suitcase. It was the same color, same style, same size as the one that had contained Millie's remains. "Where did you get that?" The question burst from her before she could stop herself. The man chuckled. "Same place as the lighter, actually. The kiosk owner in Greenville sold it to me for next to nothing when I bought the lighter. Used it once, and the handle's already broken. Total junk. Shouldn't have wasted my money." "Would you?" Rachel swallowed hard. "Would you mind if I had it? I know it sounds strange, but—" "Take it," the man said with a dismissive wave. "Save me the trouble of disposing of it." "Thank you," Rachel said. "May I ask your name and contact information?" "I'd like to thank you properly." The man looked slightly confused, but provided his details. "Name's Jeff Thornton. Can I ask why you're so interested in my old junk?" Rachel took a deep breath. "I'm here with the police investigating my missing daughters. One of them was found in a suitcase, just like this." Thornton's expression shifted from confusion to horror. "Oh, God, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." He shook his head. "I hope they find whoever did that. If there's anything else I can do to help—" "Thank you for the information about the kiosk," Rachel said. "It might be more helpful than you know." As Thornton left to catch his ferry back to the mainland, Rachel returned to her cabin with the broken suitcase, her mind racing with possibilities. Officer Martinez watched her curiously, but didn't ask questions. Rachel set the suitcase down and reached for her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed Detective Alvarez's number. "I haven't left yet," Detective Alvarez confirmed when Rachel called. "What's going on?" Rachel quickly explained about the tourist's lighter and suitcase and the connection to a newspaper kiosk in Greenville. "I need to show you this immediately." "Stay where you are," Alvarez instructed. "I'll come to you." 15 minutes later, Rachel stood at the shoreline with Officer Martinez, waiting as Alvarez approached the seaside cabin resort. The detective was deep in conversation with Curtis Bannister, who had apparently joined him after their earlier departure. As they arrived, Rachel noticed from the distance the news van pulling away, the reporter apparently finished with their coverage for the day. "Show me what you found," Alvarez said without preamble. Rachel led him back to her cabin and showed him the suitcase and described the lighter with its price sticker. The man said he bought both items from a magazine kiosk in Greenville called Kern's Corner News. Alvarez's expression sharpened. "Kern's? That's interesting." He grabbed his radio and contacted the station. "I need all available information on a business called Kern's Corner News in Greenville. Owner's name, address, business history, the works." While they waited for the information, Rachel explained how the tourist, Jeff Thornton, had described the owner as an older guy who's always got some deal going on. "If the suitcase matches the one Millie was found in," Rachel said, "and the lighter has the same store sticker as the one with her initials K.E., this can't be a coincidence." Alvarez agreed, examining the suitcase closely. "This could be the break we needed." The radio crackled to life. "Detective Alvarez, we've got that information for you. Kern's Corner News is owned by Douglas Kearns, age 57. The business has 3 locations, the main one in Greenville, one in Charlotte, and a new location opening in Virginia Beach next month. Sending you the Greenville address and Kearns' home address now." Alvarez checked his phone as the information came through. "It's late afternoon, but we still have some daylight left. Let's go check out this kiosk." They boarded the police boat with Officer Martinez and Bannister, who offered to navigate them back to the mainland. The return journey seemed faster, urgency driving them forward as the sun continued its westward descent. Once on the mainland, Alvarez requisitioned a police vehicle, and they drove directly to the address provided for Kern's Corner News. The kiosk was a small, standalone structure in a strip mall parking lot, the kind of place that sold newspapers, magazines, lottery tickets, and a hodgepodge of convenience items. A thin man in his 30s stood behind the counter, arranging a display of cigarettes. He looked up as they entered, his expression neutral. "Can I help you?" he asked. "We're closing soon." Alvarez showed his badge. "Detective Alvarez, Virginia State Police. Are you the owner of this establishment?" The man shook his head. "No, sir. I just work here. Mr. Kearns is the owner." "Is he around?" Alvarez asked. "No, he's rarely here. Moves between the different locations, checking in maybe once a week at each place." "Do you have contact information for him?" The clerk hesitated. "Sure, I guess so." He fumbled beneath the counter and produced a business card with a phone number and address. "Do you sell Zippo lighters here?" Rachel asked, stepping forward. The clerk nodded and gestured to a small display case near the register. "Right here. Got a few different styles." Rachel and Alvarez examined the lighters. They were identical to the one found with Millie, just with different designs and no initials. Alvarez showed the clerk a photo of the evidence lighter on his phone. "Have you seen this specific lighter before? It has the initials K.E. engraved on it." The clerk squinted at the image. "We sell a lot of these, and customers sometimes get them engraved after purchase. But yeah, it looks like ours. Same brand, same model." "What about suitcases?" Rachel asked. "Do you sell those here too?" The clerk looked confused. "No, ma'am. We're a newsstand, not a luggage shop." Rachel exchanged glances with Alvarez. "The tourist said he bought the suitcase here." The clerk shrugged. "Maybe Mr. Kearns sold him one of his personal items? He sometimes brings in odd stuff to sell on the side. I don't ask questions." "Thank you for your help," Alvarez said, taking the business card. "If Mr. Kearns comes in, please don't mention our visit. It's important for our investigation." Back in the car, Rachel suggested they drive by Kearns' home address. "Maybe we can get a look at the place, see if there's anything suspicious." Alvarez nodded. "We can do a drive-by, but I don't have a warrant to search the property yet. We'd need more evidence to get one." They drove through a quiet residential neighborhood of modest single-story homes with well-maintained yards. As they approached the address listed for Douglas Kearns, they slowed down, observing the property from across the street. The house was unremarkable, a pale yellow bungalow with white trim and a neatly mowed lawn. A car sat in the driveway, its license plate partially visible. "Look at that," Rachel said suddenly, pointing to the plate. "The first letters are DK and the last two are KE." Alvarez frowned. "That's interesting, but we can't make assumptions. DK could stand for Douglas Kearns, but KE might be coincidental." They sat watching the house for several minutes, but there was no movement or sign of activity inside. "I think we should head back to the station," Alvarez finally decided. "We need to coordinate with local authorities and develop a proper approach. If Kearns is involved in what happened to your daughters, we need to be strategic." Rachel nodded reluctantly. "I'm exhausted anyway. Could you drop me at the ferry station? I'll go back to the cabin for tonight." "I'd rather not have you take the public ferry," Alvarez said. "Officer Martinez can take you back in the police boat. It's safer and more discreet." They drove to the harbor where Officer Martinez was waiting with the boat. As they approached the dock, Rachel suddenly grabbed Alvarez's arm. "That car!" she exclaimed, pointing to a vehicle waiting in line for the ferry. "It has the same license plate, DK and KE." Alvarez followed her gaze, his expression turning serious as he spotted the car. Through the tinted rear window, they could just make out the shapes of people inside, an adult and what appeared to be a child in the back seat. "That could be anyone," Alvarez cautioned. "Let's not jump to conclusions." But Rachel was already moving toward the ferry line, drawn by an instinct she couldn't explain. "I just want to see who's inside," she called back. "Rachel, wait!" Alvarez hurried after her, but before he could stop her, Rachel had reached the ticketing officer who was checking each vehicle before allowing it onto the ferry. As she approached, she saw the driver's window roll down to present tickets to the officer. In the back seat sat a child with an adult female. The child seemed agitated, squirming against the woman's restraining arm. From this distance, Rachel couldn't clearly see the child's face, but something about the girl's profile and hair color triggered a visceral recognition. "Rayleigh," she whispered, her heart pounding. "That's Rayleigh." "Rachel!" Detective Alvarez caught up to her, taking her arm. "You can't just approach random vehicles. We don't have enough evidence." "It's her!" Rachel insisted, pulling away from his grip. "I saw her face just for a second. That's my daughter." Alvarez hesitated, then nodded to Officer Martinez. "Stay with Rachel. I'll speak with the ferry officer." He approached the ticket booth, speaking quietly with the officer who had been checking vehicles. The two men glanced toward the car with the DKKE license plate, which was now 3 vehicles away from boarding the ferry. After a brief conversation, Alvarez returned to Rachel. "They're going to do a secondary check on that car, just to be safe." Rachel watched anxiously as the line of cars inched forward. When the target vehicle reached the checkpoint, the ferry officer signaled for it to pull aside for additional verification. Through the tinted window, Rachel saw the driver speaking animatedly on a cell phone. Then, suddenly, the car doors flew open. A man in his 50s emerged from the driver's side, while a woman in her 30s got out from the back, pulling a young girl with her. "That's them!" Rachel cried. "That's Rayleigh!" The trio began weaving between the waiting cars, the man leading the way while the woman dragged the reluctant child behind her. Alvarez immediately radioed for backup, his voice sharp with urgency. Suspects fleeing on foot at Ocracoke Ferry Terminal with possible kidnapping victim. Adult male, adult female, and female child approximately 8 years old. Request immediate assistance and perimeter setup. The harbor officer also radioed for additional security while Alvarez turned to Rachel. "Stay with Officer Martinez. We can't risk you getting hurt if they're dangerous." Before Rachel could protest, Alvarez was sprinting toward the fleeing suspects, drawing his weapon but keeping it lowered. "Police! Stop where you are!" he shouted. The man looked back, saw Alvarez, and redoubled his pace, shouting something to the woman that Rachel couldn't hear. Within minutes, the ferry terminal erupted into controlled chaos. Police cruisers converged on the scene, blocking exits while officers on foot pursued the fleeing suspects. Passengers waiting for the ferry were directed to secure areas, and the loading process was halted. Rachel and Officer Martinez watched from a distance as the dragnet closed around the suspects. The man was tackled by two officers as he attempted to scale a security fence. The woman, still gripping the child's wrist, tried to duck between parked cars, but was quickly surrounded by police with weapons drawn. "Let go of the girl," an officer commanded. The woman hesitated, then released her hold. The child immediately broke away, looking around frantically until her eyes landed on Rachel. Even from a distance, there was no mistaking the recognition that flashed across the girl's face. "Mom!" she screamed. "Mom!" Rachel broke free from Officer Martinez and ran toward her daughter, meeting her halfway across the parking lot. She dropped to her knees, gathering Rayleigh into her arms with a sob of relief and disbelief. "Rayleigh! Oh my God, Rayleigh!" she cried, holding her daughter tightly, feeling the girl's thin body trembling against hers. Rayleigh clung to her mother, sobbing incoherently, her words muffled against Rachel's shoulder. Alvarez approached them, his expression a mix of relief and professional concern. "We've got them both in custody," he said quietly. "Rachel, we need to get you and Rayleigh someplace safe while we process the suspects." Rachel nodded, unwilling to release her hold on her daughter. "Who are they?" she managed to ask. "IDs identify them as Douglas Kearns and Kathy Evans," Alvarez replied. "Husband and wife, according to their documentation." Rachel's eyes widened. K.E. Kathy Evans, the initials on the lighter. Alvarez nodded grimly. "We've impounded their vehicle and are obtaining a warrant to search it now. Preliminary inspection shows multiple suitcases in the trunk and some concerning materials in the back seat." Rachel looked down at Rayleigh, really seeing her for the first time since their reunion. The girl was frighteningly thin, her once fair skin unnaturally tanned, as though she had been artificially darkened. Her hair had been cut shorter than Rachel had ever kept it, and her eyes held a wariness that no 8-year-old should possess. "She needs medical attention," Rachel said. "An ambulance is already on the way," Alvarez assured her. Within minutes, paramedics had arrived and were examining Rayleigh, who refused to let go of her mother's hand. The girl flinched at the bright penlight the paramedic used to check her pupils, turning her face away with a whimper. "Please stop taking pictures," she murmured. Rachel exchanged a worried glance with Alvarez, who made a note of the comment. Meanwhile, officers conducting the search of the suspect's car emerged with grim expressions. One approached Alvarez, speaking in a low voice. "We found 2 boxes of illegal magazines in the trunk," the officer reported. "Child-centered material, and syringes with what appears to be a sedative in the back seat. Looks like they were preparing to drug her before boarding the ferry." Alvarez's jaw tightened. "Get CSI on this immediately. Document everything." Rachel overheard enough to understand what they had found. Her grief over Millie transformed into white-hot rage as she watched Kearns and Evans being placed in separate police cruisers. Breaking away from Rayleigh briefly, she strode toward Kearns as officers were securing him in the vehicle. "You monster!" she screamed. "You didn't just smuggle your filthy magazines. You murdered my daughter. You murdered Millie." Kearns looked up, his expression disturbingly calm. "I didn't mean to kill the other one," he said matter-of-factly. "I wanted to keep both of them, but my partner backed out. I couldn't handle 2 children alone without getting caught. I had to make a choice." Rachel lunged toward him, but Alvarez caught her, pulling her back. "Save it for the station, Kearns," he growled at the suspect. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." As the cruisers pulled away, the paramedics approached with news about Rayleigh. "She's been drugged with a mild sedative," one reported. and there are signs of malnutrition and physical abuse. We need to transport her to the hospital immediately for a full examination and treatment." Rachel nodded, returning to her daughter's side. "I'm coming with her," she told Alvarez. "Of course," he agreed. "I'll meet you at the hospital after we process the suspects. This is just the beginning, Rachel. We're going to need statements from both of you when Rayleigh is stable." Rachel climbed into the ambulance beside her daughter, holding the girl's hand as the vehicle pulled away, sirens wailing. Despite the horror of what they had uncovered and the grief of Millie's confirmed death, Rachel felt a surge of fierce gratitude that at least one of her daughters had been found alive. "It's over, Rayleigh," she whispered, stroking her daughter's hair. "You're safe now. They can't hurt you anymore." The harsh fluorescent lighting of the hospital corridor made Rachel's eyes ache as she paced outside the emergency room. Officer Martinez remained nearby, keeping a watchful eye on both Rachel and the hospital entrance. A nurse had gently but firmly asked Rachel to wait outside while the medical team conducted their initial examination of Rayleigh. Though it tore at her to be separated from her daughter so soon after finding her, Rachel understood they needed space to document Rayleigh's condition properly. "Mrs. Marin?" The nurse who had been attending Rayleigh appeared in the doorway. "You can come in now." Rachel hurried into the room where Rayleigh lay on a hospital bed, looking even smaller and more fragile against the white sheets. An IV drip fed clear liquid into her arm, and a doctor was making notes on a chart nearby. "Mom," Rayleigh whispered, reaching out with her free hand. Rachel took it gently, careful not to disturb the IV. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere." The doctor, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a serious expression, approached them. "Mrs. Marin, I'm Dr. Patel. I've completed my initial examination of Rayleigh." "How is she?" Rachel asked, her voice tight with anxiety. Dr. Patel's expression was grave. "Rayleigh is suffering from malnutrition. She's significantly underweight for her age. There are multiple bruises on her back and legs consistent with physical discipline, likely from a narrow, flexible object like a rattan stick or thin belt." Rachel winced, squeezing Rayleigh's hand gently. "There are also marks on her wrists and ankles," Dr. Patel continued, suggesting she was restrained for extended periods, possibly with chains or zip ties. The doctor lowered her voice, though Rayleigh seemed half asleep from the medications they'd given her. "She appears extremely sensitive to bright lights and camera flashes, which is consistent with being subjected to frequent photography. Based on her reactions during our examination and some comments she made, I'm concerned she may have been used as a model for inappropriate material." Rachel closed her eyes briefly, fighting back tears. "What's the treatment plan?" "We'll start with addressing the malnutrition through carefully monitored nutrition. The sedatives in her system should metabolize within 24 hours. Physically, she should recover relatively quickly with proper care. The psychological trauma, however—" Dr. Patel's voice trailed off. "She'll need specialized therapy, Mrs. Marin. This kind of experience leaves deep scars." Rachel nodded, determination settling in her expression. "She'll get everything she needs, whatever it takes?" Dr. Patel squeezed her shoulder comfortingly. "She's a strong girl to have survived this, and having you here will make all the difference in her recovery." After the doctor left, Rachel pulled a chair close to Rayleigh's bed and sat down, maintaining her gentle hold on her daughter's hand. Rayleigh drifted in and out of sleep, occasionally muttering words that Rachel couldn't quite catch. Hours passed this way, with nurses coming and going, checking Rayleigh's vitals and adjusting her IV. Outside the window, night had fallen completely when Detective Alvarez appeared in the doorway. "How is she?" he asked quietly, noting Rayleigh's sleeping form. Rachel gestured for him to join her in the corridor. "Physically, she'll recover," she said once they were outside. "Emotionally, it's going to be a long road." Alvarez nodded grimly. "I have updates from the interrogation. Kearns isn't talking much, but Evans is cooperating. She's looking to cut a deal." "What has she told you?" Rachel asked. "A lot," Alvarez said, rubbing his tired eyes. Kearns and Evans weren't acting alone. They were part of a larger operation that produces and distributes illegal magazines featuring children. Kearns would provide the children, and others would handle the production. Rachel felt sick. How many children are we talking about? Based on Evans's statement, we believe there are at least 10 others currently being held at a property Kearns owns under a different name. We've got teams moving on that location now. And what about my daughters? How did he get to them on the cruise? Alvarez sighed heavily. According to Evans, Kearns boarded the cruise under a fake name using a prepaid card and burner email. He disguised himself as part of the ship's maintenance crew by stealing a uniform from a storage closet early in the trip. He also used a small electronic device to temporarily disable the security camera near where he took the girls. Rachel leaned against the wall, trying to process this information. But how did he get them to go with him? My girls knew better than to go with strangers. Evans said he'd been watching them earlier in the cruise. He saw them enjoying one of the magic shows and used that to his advantage. When he encountered them alone, he performed a simple card trick he'd learned from watching the ship's magician. Once he gained their trust, he led them to a crew hallway where there were fewer cameras. Rachel closed her eyes, imagining her trusting daughters following a kind man who showed them magic tricks. And Millie? What happened to her? Alvarez's expression darkened. Evans wasn't there for that part, but from what Kearns told her later, he had originally planned to take both girls. But his partner at the time, not Evans, backed out when he realized there were twins. Apparently, keeping 2 children would have been too risky and complicated. So Kearns... Alvarez paused. He suffocated Millie. No struggle, no blood, no noise. He wrapped her in her clothes, placed her in the suitcase, and disposed of it overboard that night from an unsecured deck area where waste is sometimes jettisoned. Rachel pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting back a sob. And Rayleigh? How did he get her off the ship? He kept her hidden in his cabin bathroom until they docked in Key West the next morning. He drugged her just enough to keep her compliant but responsive, and threatened her about Millie. When they disembarked, he used disguises, sunglasses, fake beard, different clothes, and exited during the early morning rush when most attention was on families with children. Alvarez continued. According to Evans, Kearns had prepared fake documentation for Rayleigh. They've been moving her between different locations, from Key West up through Florida and finally to North Carolina, to avoid detection. Rachel shook her head in disbelief. They were in Virginia before the cruise. Was he stalking us before this happened? Evans confirmed that Kearns traveled often and had mentioned seeing beautiful twin girls in Virginia that would be perfect for their next edition. We believe he may have spotted you and your daughters before the cruise and planned this specifically. Rachel felt a chill run through her. What about the lighter with KE on it? Was that intentional? Just a coincidence, apparently. Evans said it was her personal lighter that got mixed up with Millie's things when Kearns was rushing to dispose of the body. She'd been looking for it for months. Rachel glanced back at the hospital room where Rayleigh slept. We have to make sure they never get out. And all those magazines, they need to be destroyed. Those children don't deserve to have their trauma circulating forever. Alvarez nodded firmly. We're working with federal authorities now. This is bigger than just one case, but I promise you, Kearns and Evans will pay for what they did to your family. He placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. You should get some rest. Rayleigh will need you at full strength when she wakes up. Rachel nodded, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Thank you, Detective, for everything. As Alvarez left, Rachel returned to Rayleigh's bedside, settling into the uncomfortable hospital chair for what would likely be a long night. Despite the horror of what she had learned, she felt a sense of grim satisfaction that the perpetrators had been caught and a flicker of hope that her surviving daughter was finally safe. Early morning sunlight filtered through the thin hospital curtains as Rachel blinked awake, her neck stiff from sleeping in the chair beside Rayleigh's bed. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back. She sat up quickly, checking on Rayleigh. Her daughter was still asleep, looking slightly less pale than the night before. The IV drip had been replaced overnight, and a tray with bland hospital breakfast sat untouched on the side table. A soft knock at the door drew her attention. A nurse entered, followed by Dr. Patel. "Good morning, Doctor," Patel said quietly. "How did she sleep?" "Restlessly," Rachel replied. She had nightmares, kept talking in her sleep. Dr. Patel nodded as she examined Rayleigh's chart. "That's to be expected. The sedatives they were giving her are working their way out of her system. We'd like to run some additional tests today, with your permission." "Of course," Rachel agreed. "Whatever she needs." As the doctor continued her examination, Officer Martinez appeared in the doorway, looking like she too had spent an uncomfortable night in a chair. "Mrs. Marin," she said, "Detective Alvarez called. He's on his way here with an update." Rachel nodded gratefully. "Thank you for staying all night." Martinez offered a tired smile. "Just doing my job, ma'am, though I have to admit, I've never seen a case like this in all my years on the force. You're one lucky woman to have found your daughter alive after all this time." Rachel looked down at Rayleigh's sleeping form. "If I were lucky, I wouldn't have lost either of my daughters to begin with." Martinez's expression softened. "I'm sorry, that was insensitive of me." "No," Rachel sighed. "You're right in a way. Many parents never get closure, never find their missing children. At least I have Rayleigh back, and I know what happened to Millie." Her voice broke slightly. "It's a bitter kind of luck, but it's something." Dr. Patel finished her examination and turned to Rachel. "Rayleigh's vital signs are improving. The lab tests show the sedatives are clearing from her system, but she's still severely malnourished. We'll start her on a carefully monitored diet today." "When can I take her home?" Rachel asked. "Not for at least a few days, Doctor," Patel replied. "We need to stabilize her physically and begin a psychological assessment before discharge, and even then she'll need ongoing care." Rachel nodded, accepting the long road ahead. About an hour later, Rayleigh began to stir. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding them briefly before focusing on Rachel. "Mom?" she whispered, as if afraid believing it might make the vision disappear. "I'm here, sweetheart," Rachel said, moving to sit on the edge of the bed. "You're safe now." Rayleigh's eyes filled with tears. "Millie? Where's Millie?" Rachel swallowed hard, unsure how to explain to an 8-year-old that her twin sister had been murdered. Before she could form a response, Detective Alvarez appeared in the doorway, his expression solemn but satisfied. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. Rachel nodded, grateful for the momentary reprieve from answering Rayleigh's question. Alvarez entered, taking off his hat respectfully. "Morning, Rachel. Hello, Rayleigh. I'm Detective Alvarez. I've been helping your mom look for you." Rayleigh regarded him warily, instinctively shrinking against her mother. "It's okay," Rachel assured her. "Detective Alvarez is one of the good guys." Alvarez kept a respectful distance, his voice calm and gentle. "I thought you'd want to know. We conducted a raid early this morning on another property owned by Douglas Kearns. It was on Cedar Island, the place he planned to take Rayleigh yesterday, according to what we gathered from the ferry station. We rescued 3 more children who were being held there." Rachel gasped. "Are they all right?" "They're receiving medical attention now," Alvarez said. "Some have been missing for over a year. We're working on identifying them all and contacting their families." Rachel felt a surge of fierce satisfaction. "What about Kearns and Evans? Are they talking?" "Evans has given a full confession in exchange for leniency at sentencing," Alvarez confirmed. "She said she couldn't live with the guilt any longer. She always knew it was wrong, even though she helped coordinate things from here for her husband. Kearns is still being uncooperative, but with Evans's testimony and the evidence we've gathered, he's now facing multiple life sentences. Good, Rachel said firmly. I hope they rot behind prison for a long time, even for the wife. She still helped keep my daughter captive for months. She still participated in... She couldn't bring herself to finish the sentence. She'll face substantial charges, Alvarez assured her. Her cooperation may reduce her sentence, but she won't walk free. Rachel glanced back at Rayleigh through the doorway. What happens now? We'll need a formal statement from you, and eventually, when she's ready, from Rayleigh as well. But there's no rush on that. Her recovery comes first. Rachel nodded gratefully. Thank you, Detective. For everything? I'm just glad we found her, Alvarez said sincerely. In all my years on the job, cases like this rarely end with the child coming home alive. After Alvarez left, Rachel returned to Rayleigh's bedside. The girl was awake again, watching her mother with an intensity that spoke volumes about her fear of being separated again. Mom, she said in a small voice, Millie's gone, isn't she? Really gone? Rachel took a deep breath and sat down, taking Rayleigh's hand in hers. Yes, sweetheart, Millie is gone. The bad man hurt her very badly. Tears welled in Rayleigh's eyes. I knew it. He told me she was gone, but I didn't want to believe him. I kept thinking she might be somewhere else, like me, that maybe you'd find both of us. I wish we had, Rachel said, her own tears falling freely now. I looked for both of you every single day. I never stopped. I was so scared, Rayleigh whispered. After they took us and Millie was gone, they kept moving me to different places. They changed how I looked. They made me stand still while they took pictures, and if I cried, they would hit me. They said if I tried to run away or tell anyone, they would hurt you too. Rachel gathered her daughter carefully in her arms, mindful of the IV. You were so brave, Rayleigh. So brave. And you don't have to be scared anymore. Those people are going to jail for a very long time. They can never hurt you or anyone else again. For a long time, mother and daughter simply held each other, sharing their grief for Millie and their relief at being reunited. Eventually, Rayleigh's medication began to make her drowsy again, and she drifted off to sleep in Rachel's arms. As Rachel gently laid her daughter back against the pillows, she noticed something she hadn't seen before, a small scar near Rayleigh's hairline, likely from one of the many abuses she had suffered over the past 10 months. It was a visible reminder of all that had been taken from her daughter, her innocence, her sense of security, her twin sister. But looking at Rayleigh's sleeping face, Rachel also saw strength there, the same determined spirit that had helped her survive her ordeal. It would be a long road to recovery, filled with therapy sessions, nightmares, and painful memories. There would be a funeral for Millie, and days when grief would overwhelm them both. Yet, for the first time in 10 months, Rachel felt something like hope stirring within her. They would build a new life, one that honored Millie's memory while allowing Rayleigh to heal and eventually thrive again. We're going to be okay, she whispered, smoothing Rayleigh's hair back from her forehead. Somehow, someday, we're going to be okay. Outside the window, the morning sun continued its climb into the sky, casting long shadows that gradually shortened as the day progressed. A silent reminder that even after the darkest night, dawn eventually comes.